Now, in this video, I want to talk to you about Facebook, right? Facebook and the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. Now, there's been many funny memes about this guy in recent weeks and in recent years, more broadly speaking. And we want to talk about how you might want to change the workplace culture, focus on more of a male-orientated workplace environment, and certain interesting events in his personal life. So I want to start with this funny meme. We have this meme posted by Parikh Patel, who posts kind of funny tweets, and he's kind of known for that. He says, "Inside you, there are two wolves. One of them wants a trad Asian wife, and the other one wants a spicy Latina girlfriend." So you can see Mark Zuckerberg, he was kind of recently embarrassed because at the recent inauguration, he was caught kind of obviously staring down the top of the wife of Jeff Bezos, so Amazon CEO's wife, who's the woman on the right now, wearing the white blazer. He was staring down her top, even though he's standing right next to his wife at the time, who is a trad Asian wife. So let me know what you think about this meme, right? So let me know in the comments if you're a man, right? He's finally showing that he's not a clone, Mark Zuckerberg, and he was staring at the woman, like I said, the Latina in the white blazer. So who would you prefer in your personal life? Would you prefer a trad Asian wife or a spicy Latina girlfriend? So that's the first little comment we have there. Let me know what you feel about this in the comments. I think it's quite funny. Now, Megyn Kelly, the conservative commentator, had kind of an interesting comment on this and the incident with Mark Zuckerberg. So let's listen to her here.
While we're on the subject of fashion, you knew that Lauren Sanchez was not going to make it through this show without a mention. She dresses like a prostitute. She looked like a hooker. At the inauguration, she wore a corset and she had her boobs on display. I can't with this woman. The girls were out. She thought that, look at this. I can see the middle of her boobs. I can see her under boob, like right there. Right. This is absurd. She couldn't even keep them covered up for a day. And all over at the X was a picture of Mark Zuckerberg who was sitting next to her, copying.
He knew where the action was at.
Sneaky peek. I don't blame him at all. That's exactly.
You can't look away.
Oh, I can.
It was like bombs out in the rotunda, and we were joking before the show, like,
Who could blame him? That's why she did it.
are we going to
It
get
is.
Washington Post style section?
So here we have this incident, which is kind of funny, right? And when I see these women commentate, I think maybe they're coming at it from a conservative perspective. But when a woman's critical of other women, sometimes it sounds like jealousy that other women are getting attention. A couple points to mention here, right? So firstly, a lot of women kind of dress inappropriately on the trading floor and on the trading floor of or major offices, investment banks, things like that. And they're never really held accountable. I always think how there's a completely different dress code that women are allowed to have. They can wear whatever they want, never held accountable by the men because you have a society or people in charge who are kind of typically weak men. And we're not really allowed to hold women accountable for how they dress, right? But male dress code has to be very similar. That's why all guys are wearing basically the same suit and tie. And what's interesting here is if Mark Zuckerberg wants to push for having more male-orientated work environments, which we'll come on to in a second, is he going to normalize male behavior, men being able to make jokes or saying things that might be considered locker room talk in the office? So we're going to find out what he thinks in a moment here. Now, this tweet has over 3.4 million views, and it's Mark Zuckerberg being critical of the corporate environment. So let's listen to what he has to say here.
For me, it's I think a lot of the corporate world is pretty culturally neutered. And I just think having, I grew up, I have 3 sisters, no brothers. I have 3 daughters, no sons. So I'm surrounded by girls and women my whole life. And it's I don't know. There's just something, the kind of masculine energy I think is good. And obviously, society has plenty of that, but I think corporate culture was really trying to get away from it. And I do think that there's just something, it's I don't know, all these forms of energy are good. And I think having a culture that celebrates the aggression a bit more has its own merits that are really positive. And that has been a positive experience for me. Just having a thing that I can just do with my guy friends and and it's just we're just beat each other a bit. I don't know, it's good.
It is good.
Yeah,
I agree. It's good. I can see your point though about corporate
culture. How do you think that happened? Was that a slow shift? Because I think it used to be very masculine. And I think it was kind of hyper aggressive at one point.
No, and look, and I think part of the intent on all these things I think is good, right? I do think that if you're a woman going into a company, it probably feels like it's too masculine. It's like there isn't enough of the energy that you may naturally have, and it probably feels like there are all these things that are set up that are biased against you, and that's not good either, because you want women to be able to succeed and like have companies that can unlock all the value from having great people, no matter what their background or gender, So, but I think these things can always go a little far, and I think it's one thing to say we want to be kind of like welcoming and make a good environment for everyone, and I think it's another to basically say that masculinity is bad. And I just think we kind of swung culturally to that part of the spectrum where, it's all like, okay, masculinity is toxic. We have to like get rid of it completely. It's like, no, like it's both of these things are good, right? It's like you want like feminine energy, you want masculine energy. Like I think that's like you're going to have parts of society that have more of one or the other. I think that's all good. But I do think the corporate culture sort of had swung towards being this somewhat more neutered thing. And I didn't really feel that until I got involved in martial arts, which I think is still a more masculine culture. And not that it doesn't try to be inclusive in its own way, but I think that there's just a lot more of that energy there. And I just kind of realized it's like, oh, this is
that's
like,
how you become successful at martial arts. You have to be at least somewhat aggressive.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are like a few of these things throughout your life where you have an experience and you're like, where has this been my whole life? And it just turned on like a part of my brain that I was like, okay, like this was a piece of the puzzle that should have been there, and I'm glad it now is.
Now it seems like Mark Zuckerberg is saying what I've been saying for a long time, right? And what was kind of unacceptable to say for like a decade, that's how it feels at least, where you're not allowed to say we need kind of more masculine culture in the workplace environment, more freedom of speech and things like this. Now, I agree with him, but the thing is with Zuckerberg and a lot of these other billionaire characters, they're kind of, why is it saying it now, right? And you might say, well, he recently visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago and he had to kind of bend the knee and kiss the ring and kind of pander to whatever the shift of the narrative is. And it definitely seems like the deep state or the people who really run power that we never see is getting all these billionaires to kind of push against DEI, push towards more men in culture rather than just being feminized and things like that, right? So I do think to a certain extent these people are like actors. They've been told to switch the narrative. That's why all of a sudden it's by design that he's allowed to say these type of things that typically he wouldn't be allowed to say. And the thing is, putting aside his intention or the underlying narrative here, I think he's making some good points. And a lot of the times, the way he's framing this is saying that, oh, it's just an unintended consequence. There's no such thing as unintended consequences in this system. They knew they were constraining and restricting and limiting men and creating an artificial bias in favor of women to double the workforce, getting more men and women in the workforce, and also lowering the birth rate in the process. The system's kind of gone too far, and I think the people who run the system can see that it doesn't want millions of working age men pushing back against it in the streets, so they're kind of allowing some cultural shifts to occur. If we look at the kind of quote he says here, right, he's talking about how, if you're he goes through it in a bit of detail, what he just said, right? And the one thing I want to say, one thing to create a welcoming environment for women who are in the workplace, but it's another thing to create a dynamic where men are bad or everything's pandering to women, right? And I agree with him what he's saying about masculine or traditionally masculine hobbies, MMA, weightlifting, other kind of pursuits like that, building, construction, things like that you might have in your spare time. The workplace is kind of neutered, and when it neuters men in the workplace, it also neuters risk-taking, entrepreneurship, efficiency. It becomes about all the opposite things, emotional, about people's feelings, and all this kind of childish, kind of domesticated nature in the workplace environment when you let it be dominated by women compared to men, right? And the truth is, like I say, why is he pushing against to get this type of feminist talking point now? It just seems very fake, very manufactured. He's saying it when it's free to do it now, right? When it's doing it for his own benefit, to get Trump in his good books, to get men kind of to support him. And that's kind of been a longer term PR shift he's had, with his shift towards MMA, the way he dresses, the way his hair is, the type of jewelry he has around his neck. It does seem like a bit of a manufactured kind of shift in his behavior that his PR team or the establishment wants him to kind of shift in, right? And this is the thing, a lot of these major corporations, they can afford to have the bloat of DEI, of the feminist girl boss type of girl power narrative, because they can afford to have the inefficiencies that come along with that, right? And when it comes to real profit driven companies, they don't have the resources to play along with the DEI theater and the nonsense. They need people who are competent, who can get the work done for a relatively low cost, right? So this is very important to consider. Like I say, while I agree with him, it's important to question why now, because he didn't take the massive risks I've taken in my career and many other men have taken who got cancelled in one way, shape or form, pointing out these things, maybe without $1 billion in the bank account, taking risks. He could have taken, he was in a position like Elon Musk, he could have taken the risk and say Facebook wants freedom of speech, the same way Elon Musk wants freedom of speech on their platform. He didn't take the risk when it was a risky thing to do. He didn't get cancelled. He didn't risk his career. In fact, one of his co-workers, and I mentioned this in another video, once of his co-worker employees, who was the vice president of global policy at Facebook, he wanted to show support by attending a false allegation that Brett Kavanaugh had when he was running for Supreme Court. He wanted to attend that court case to support his friend, and then Facebook initially said it's okay, but then they said he shouldn't attend because it's bad media for them, and female employees were basically complaining about this guy supporting his friend at a false allegation type of court hearing. So he's not really someone who's on our side, you know, he's not one of the good guys, he's not, you know, /our guy, if we want to quote 4chan. These are the type of people who are like actors, right? They're just parroting the points when it's convenient for their career or their company. So I'm kind of skeptical of that, but overall it's good there is a shift in the direction that would be favorable to my perspective or your perspective in the corporate environment. Mark Zuckerberg is talking about how companies need more masculine energy, and it's a very interesting article to expand upon what he was just saying. Here he talks about how the Biden administration was restricting free speech, which again, like, men need to come up with new ideas, discuss things. When it comes to the Biden administration, they were pressuring Meta to remove comment about, you know, the issues going on in 2020. They would essentially scream and curse at Facebook employees, and he said there was massive government overreach to kind of push these type of agendas and kind of pressurize Facebook to restrict freedom of speech. It damaged public trust, and the US government should be defending its companies, not attacking its companies and forcing them to restrict their free speech, which he felt under stress to deal with. And here he says it's completely contrary to everything America is about, right? To limiting freedom of speech, limiting people's ability to tell the truth and things like this. I'm suspicious that now all of a sudden he's on the side of the right opinion, whereas previously he had no problem restricting people's freedom of speech. Now the administration and government has changed. Now he feels comfortable to be a man in public and things like this. It's just not adding up to me. Now, what's interesting here is how different people react to this type of instance. Here we have comedians who I would say broadly lean to the right, and they're making kind of fun of this type of instance around DEI.
Soraya Kamyameli, an activist and author of Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Woman's Anger. She's weighed in. So what side do you think she's coming down on this issue?
She doesn't, we've had enough masculinity.
What do you think she thinks of the masculine energy? Let me remind you, she's an activist and the author of Rage Becomes Her, The Power of a Woman's Anger. Hear me.
Sonia, we're not doing this anymore. It's happening.
Well, I'll give a spoiler alert to those who haven't read the article yet. She's not liking it.
No. She's not liking it. I mean, again, this is going to be, for people like her, this next little bit is going to be a very tough adjustment period.
Oh, buddy.
Like, she's going to be like, excuse me. And we're like,
shut the fuck up.
Shut up, bitch. We don't care anymore. It's over. You had
a really good run.
Enjoy it. It's like, you know, you're like the fucking New England Patriots. It's like you guys were like borderline dynasty at one point.
It's going to be remembered forever.
Now you're a lottery team, okay? You're going for 1 to 3 pick here. It's over. You're in a rebuild, okay?
You don't get to start from the premise where everyone agrees with you. You have to pitch your case from the start.
Correct. Yeah. It's not doing this.
And you know what? As soon as you use buzzwords, everyone's tuning out. So she says, the language of masculine energy hides how problematic. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly.
Try again, Soraya.
You literally need an entirely new nomenclature. Like, you need all new words.
You're not going to be hitting me with
But the problem
problematic.
is
we never was hit with problematic. I tuned it out 2017 when I was getting hit with problematic.
Absolutely. And the problem is they got to make up, like, for the last 10 years, they got to make up all these new words, and they stuck. And now you're like, we don't even care. We don't want your new words. You don't even get to, like, suggest new terms.
Well, I mean, it's a guy showing up with a Habs jersey telling you what he thinks the Leafs should do, and you go, we don't listen to you.
No.
You know what I mean?
No dice. This is like, you need a new game plan entirely. Like, if you think your old game plan is going to work, like, it's not.
I'm going to do a sketch, laid off diversity counselor looking for work. And I'm going to go into businesses and ask if they need one and tell them what I could do. Basically, I'd get rid of you. You know what I mean? Pretty good, right?
Yeah. So
the truth is, corporate America does not lack masculine energy. Men lead 90% of Fortune 500 companies. Men still earn 12% more. It's like, yes, but that's not what he's talking about.
No.
He's not talking about the CEO's a man. He's talking about whether the CEO's afraid to fucking, like, discuss things how he wants to.
yeah, exactly. He's just like, he'd be an effective leader, essentially. And you're just,
Yeah, whether
again, we're not saying, there's not a hiring freeze on women or anything.
Yes.
Like,
The question is whether HR department is like, giving people reprimanded over the wrong word. Like,
Right.
The question is like, does HR department, how powerful are they?
Yeah.
Are they like Toby in The Office where it's like everyone kind of rolls their eyes at this person? Or is it like, are they I'd rather piss off the CEO than the HR department.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you should care about. And, there's no more like, hey, I just noticed that my coworker removed his pronouns from his email signature.
Hiya! That's what Zuckerberg does. Hiya!
Because pronouns are over. It's done.
Yeah.
No pronouns in email signatures.
You're in a figure four.
Dude, the amount of pronouns that have been removed from email signatures.
Do you think it was a
in the last
rapture?
couple- Oh, dude, the amount of pronouns that have been removed from email signatures in the last 2 days, like, crazy. It's HR departments' heads are fucking spinning with this.
I still get hit with sometimes in emails.
Well, I'm saying in the last 2 days.
Delete.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it went from like this thing you had to do to now like red flag.
She, her. I think it's more like go gone.
Elite.
To kind of feedback off that point, right? So essentially what we have is an instance where, feminists have kind of lost, all these politically correct leftists, the woke ideology, they've lost the power of the narrative, right? The narrative now is leaning right. So it doesn't work anymore. All of these buzzwords they use to control people. Oh, that's problematic. That's toxic. That's, that's inappropriate, things like that. Those type of words have lost their meaning. It's even like calling people a racist or things like that. It's lost meaning because it's been used so much, right? And a lot of these shaming tactics, they just don't work anymore, right? Will HR change? That's the fundamental question, right? HR Karen's still in power, so I'd recommend you be careful. A lot of people are going to see the change in culture outside of work. They're going to think maybe they're working for a US corporation that will change overnight. It probably won't. It'll be very slow and it'll be very minimal. You'll have a lot more freedom of speech maybe on podcasts, on YouTube, things like that, but in your day-to-day job, HR Karens, a lot of this entire ruling class, this managerial class of political correctness and bias against men, that's still very deeply embedded. I wouldn't kind of get too carried away and think that's going to change overnight. And then the other thing is around not forgetting who switches up now. Like I say, a lot of people are going to switch up now. Maybe co-workers, they're going to say all of a sudden they agree with whatever benefits men or certain talking points that benefit men. But these people are slimy, greasy liars. They're like car salesmen. They're like politicians. Whatever's the convenient opinion to be popular, they're going to parrot it now. I would never forget people who were aligned against you. Maybe if you didn't agree with the restrictions and things like that in 2020, the anti-male bias, the anti-freedom of speech. People who switch up now, I would always, I wouldn't trust them and I wouldn't really be too close to them, even in the work environment. You've got to be careful. These people will parrot any ideology that supports the current narrative as it currently is, right? Now, as you can see, Meta, and not just Meta, many other companies are pushing back against this DEI agenda. We can see Meta is killing or ending their DEI program. You can see they're mentioning this kind of outright, and I'm going to go through this in other videos about how many companies are ending their DEI program because they realize how unpopular it's become. And there's many shifts. Walmart, McDonald's, many other companies are dealing with pushback from their employees and other people saying it's impacting the competency and motivation of employees. See on your screen that a news that came out relatively recently was Zuckerberg, who is ordering the removal of tampons from the men's bathroom. So that's major change from a lot of the ridiculous political correctness that you had to deal with in these tech companies. Then you have another instance where Zuckerberg deleted the rainbow flag themes in the Meta Messenger app. So that's another case of pushing back against political correctness. This kind of crazed kind of pushback against all this political correctness at a very strong level at Meta and what they allow in terms of so-called hate speech, in terms of what opinions people can express. So it says leaked Meta rules, users are now free to post things I'm not going to repeat right now, right, about immigrants not being good, or about certain people of the rainbow flag community being immoral. So all of a sudden they're changing this, and the question is why, right? Now partly I agree with it, more freedom of speech is good for people, of course, but the other point to mention is, okay, why are they all of a sudden pushing against this, right? If you look at the little subheading, it says under Meta or Facebook's relaxed hate speech rules, users can now post that they're a proud, I'm not going to say that word, and then, or that certain demographics are more violent than other demographics. So all of a sudden they change these rules, right? And it's kind of weird, right? All these internal trainings have changed, that just insulting people is allowed as long as it's not too offensive, which is kind of weird gray area to have. Here you can see some of the quotes of what you're allowed to say now on Meta, right? So you can say that immigrants are not good. I won't repeat the words here, or other demographics are freaks. But all in the past you couldn't say this. You'd be completely banned from Facebook, right? Now, other positions that people are taking is quite interesting, because there's been lots of commentary on what you're allowed to say now. All of a sudden, many experts say that these moves are politically motivated. Like, say Zuckerberg sucking up to Trump, trying to get that positioning by allowing more freedom of speech that could lean more right wing. Some of these experts, content moderation experts, Kate Klonick, which probably is another Karen to put it nicely, they're saying these rules aren't neutral, they're kind of biased in favor of the right, broadly speaking, and they favor conservative viewpoints compared to left-wing viewpoints. So it's kind of interesting considering that perspective. Now, all of a sudden, you're allowed to make these kind of broad comments around race on Facebook, right? So broad negative generalizations about race, ethnicities, and nationalities are allowed. Being critical of migration or specific cases, it mentions the Japanese here, or other demographics being drug dealers. So it's all these type of weird changes that all of a sudden you're allowed to have the most extreme level of free speech. It's not like they slowly pushed back on some of the political correctness. It's kind of weird how they work, right? And also when it comes to superiority, right? So typically you can't say one race is superior to the other, but now all of a sudden you're allowed to say you're superior to others as long as you're not talking down about other demographics. All these type of weird rules, right? About these free speech rules. Now, what do I broadly think about this? Now, do I think it's good that Facebook wants to allow more of a masculine culture in their environment? That's good, right? Do I think it's good that there's more freedom of speech and critical free speech of the left-wing talking points? That's good too. But I don't necessarily think we should have these super extreme offensive perspectives of other demographics. But again, if people are saying things you don't like, you can just read over it or just ignore it or block it or mute it on your social media platforms so you can ignore it. But I generally do think he's making a good point in his article that we went through a bit earlier here, where he says that corporations do need more masculine energy. And if you think about just a few years ago, you'd be completely ridiculed, cancelled, lose your job, laughed out the building for having these type of talking points. So it's showing how the culture is shifting in a more positive way. And one thing I'd recommend, or the 2 points, is don't forget people like Zuckerberg were not standing with you when it really mattered in 2020, 2021, 2022, when it came to your freedom of speech and the freedom of your body and your health. They're kind of actors, they're pushing the viewpoint now because people like me and people like you did the right thing and stood up when it actually mattered for free speech and for freedom of humans, and we took the hit when people lost their jobs and they weren't billionaires or even millionaires. People really took the hit in terms of families becoming dysfunctional if you didn't agree with them on the medical issue around that 2020 era, or you have a different view on race or gender and things like that. So bear in mind who's really stood with you when it really mattered, not someone who's jumping on the bandwagon like a billionaire Zuckerberg. Now, That's kind of the first point, is being aware of that. And secondly, hopefully just be kind of optimistic. There could be some changes in a corporation, even at a smaller level, that make it a bit more palatable for you to be in a corporate environment without feeling on edge all the time. Now, I've worked for over a decade at major investment banks like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and dealt with the kind of roller coaster of political correctness and how that can impact the work environment. And I offer a career coaching program, link in description if you want to speak with me directly. I will help you with 5 elements: developing your corporate career or your career, maximizing your freedom, outsmarting office politics, dealing as a man in the corporate environment, and how to survive and thrive in these difficult type of dynamics, preparing for promotions, how to manage layoffs, and also developing a financial stability and success plan so you can be free over the long term and not at the behest of these crazy billionaires who might support you one day and then trash you the next. So let me know in the comments what you think about Zuckerberg. Also, let me know if you prefer a trad Asian wife or a spicy Latina girlfriend. That would be very interesting to hear your perspective on that. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you in the next video.